I refused to quit my job for the luxurious lifestyle of my fiancée. Hi Reddit. I never thought I'd be posting a story like this here, but honestly I need some outside opinions. I've always considered myself a reasonable person, but the last few months have literally turned my life upside down. And yeah, it's a long story, so get comfortable and brace yourselves. There's everything here. Love, ambitions, family, and betrayal. When I met Emily, I thought I'd found the one. We met in a coffee shop in Barcelona's Gothic quarter where I'd been living for the past few years after moving from London. Emily was vibrant, ambitious, smart, a girl with an infectious laugh and eyes that hooked you right away. We started dating and everything seemed perfect. At least, that's what I thought. The first few months were like a movie. Walks along the waterfront, late dinners in little Spanish restaurants, spontaneous trips to Seville and Madrid. I felt happy. I worked as a graphic designer in a small but stable firm where my salary was more than enough for life in Barcelona. We dreamed about the future together, talked about weddings, kids, and a house in the suburbs. But gradually something started bothering me. Emily's conversations increasingly revolved around money. At first it was light-hearted joking. "Alex, imagine if we could afford a trip to Mallorca every summer," or "you could ask for a raise, right?" I didn't pay much attention to it back then. But over time, the jokes turned into demands. "Alex," she said one evening, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, "do you really think your salary is enough to give us a comfortable future?" I thought it was," I replied, looking at her in surprise. "We're living pretty well." "No, Alex, you're living pretty well for yourself. But for me, it's not enough. You need to do more. We need money." More," she said, leaning toward me, and there was a steel in her voice I'd never heard before. That was the first time I felt uncomfortable. I started noticing that her love for money sometimes outweighed her love for me. I tried not to think about it, chalking it up to stress or my own doubts. But a few weeks later, she said it straight out. "Alex, I want you to quit your job. Start your own startup. That project you talked about. You know, I want us to live better and your current job won't give us that." I froze. Quit my job for an unknown startup that might bring nothing but stress and debt, just to make us rich. All for her vision of our life. I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said cautiously. "Why not?" she asked irritably. "You love me, right? Love means making sacrifices for your partner. Are you ready to do that for me?" I felt irritation building inside me. Love. Yes, I loved her. But love doesn't mean blindly submitting to someone's every whim, especially when it comes to financial security and the future. Um, Emily, love doesn't mean jumping into risks without thinking. I love you, but I have my own principles," I said. Her eyes narrowed, her lips tightened, and I saw the Emily I'd never noticed before. Ambitious, demanding, ready to manipulate feelings for money. The following weeks turned into a series of arguments. Every conversation ended with her pointing out my shortcomings, and I increasingly felt cornered. "You're not even willing to do the maximum for me," she yelled one night. "I deserve better." "And what does better mean?" I asked. "Living in constant fear of bankruptcy for your idea. I want stability." And that's when everything started crumbling. I realized we saw the world differently. For me, happiness was in shared life, supporting each other, love, and stability. For her, it was money, status, and how we appeared to others. I tried compromising, suggested putting off the startup for a year, saving up capital, preparing the ground. But every time, her response was the same. "No, Alex, I want it now. If you love me, you'll do it." I started understanding that this wasn't just a dispute about money. It was a power struggle for control, for her idea of what our life should be. And deep down, I knew that if I gave in, I'd lose myself. And then, after months of pressure, I made the decision that changed everything. I broke up with Emily. "Alex, are you kidding?" she asked that evening when I told her straight. "You can't just dump me." Um, Emily, I replied calmly. I love you, but I can't live in a relationship where I'm forced to submit to someone else's greed and ambitions. I want to be with someone who values me and my principles. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She yelled, begged, tried to manipulate, but I stood firm. I felt a storm of emotions inside: bitterness, relief, pain, freedom. And here's where I need your opinion, Reddit. I get that to some I might look weak, and to others, a jerk who dumped the girl he loved. But every time I think about the future, my career, my principles and values, I realize one thing. Sometimes love doesn't mean agreeing to everything. Sometimes love is knowing how to say no, even if it destroys the relationship. After breaking up with Emily, Barcelona felt like a foreign city to me. Every corner reminded me of us, of walks, dinners, laughter that I once thought was my music. But now it was silence that pressed harder than any screams or fights. The next day after the breakup, I met up with my friends, Jason and Mario, whom I'd known since university. They immediately noticed something was off. "Alex, you look like a zombie," Jason said as we sat in a small cafe on La Rambla. "What happened?" I sighed. I didn't want to share all the details, but something inside demanded I spill the built-up pain. "We broke up," I said shortly. "Emily. She wanted me to quit my job for a startup that might not make any money. I couldn't agree." "You did the right thing," Mario supported. "But it's your life and I know how it weighs on you." We sat in silence while crowds of tourists rushed by outside. I felt a mix of relief and emptiness. I was free, but the price of freedom seemed too high. The next day, I decided to get back to work. My company, a small but creative studio, became a real refuge for me. Here, I could focus on design, not Emily's endless demands. But then the calls started, first short and sharp. "Alex, let's meet," I heard on the phone. It was Emily's voice. I didn't answer. "Alex, you need to think again. I love you," she wrote in messages that I just ignored. And then, a week later, she showed up at my apartment. The Barcelona air was filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts, but inside my home, there was silence that she decided to shatter. "Alex, please," she said, standing in the doorway. "I'm ready to discuss everything. Let's start over." I felt a storm of emotions inside: anger, regret, pain, doubt. "Emily," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding, "it's impossible. We're too different. You see the world through money and status. I want stability, respect, and real love." "But Alex," her eyes glistened with tears, "I'm ready to change everything. I can." "Emily, no. I can't live feeling pressure, threats, manipulation every day. That's not love, that's a game." She flinched as if I'd struck her with words. For a moment, I saw a mix of pain and fury in her eyes. "You think you're right," she whispered through tears. "Think everything has to be your way." "No," I replied. "I think we're no longer compatible. I'm trying to preserve myself." After that, she left, slamming the door so hard the whole apartment shook. I was left alone. Memories swirled in my head, our trips, laughter, shared dreams. And suddenly it hit me that I'd lost not just her. I'd lost a part of myself that I'd given away in that relationship for so long. The following days were spent trying to recover. I got back to work, spent more time with friends, tried new hobbies. But every joy was tinged with thoughts that Emily had tried to change me, and I hadn't given in. Then messages started coming from mutual friends who knew us together. "Alex, you're being too harsh," one wrote. "Maybe give her a chance." "She's just greedy and controlling," another replied. "You did the right thing." I read these messages and felt the storm still raging inside. It was hard to figure out who was right: me, sticking to my principles, or people for whom compromises in love are the norm. A month after the breakup, Emily started publicly discussing our relationship on social media. She posted about how I was too weak to be a successful partner, that love requires sacrifices, and hinted at my inability to understand her ambitions. Barcelona, which used to be our city, turned into a labyrinth of memories and public pressure. Every time I walked down La Rambla, it felt like all eyes were on me, as if the city was judging me for staying true to myself. It's been a month since Emily left my life. Barcelona, which once felt cozy, now seemed alien. Every corner, cafe, park, La Rambla, reminded me of us, our arguments and dreams that never came true. But gradually, I started finding strength in myself. Work at the studio became a refuge again. The projects I worked on brought satisfaction, and colleagues supported and inspired me. I dove into creativity, design, and team meetings, trying not to think about what was left behind. But the past wouldn't stay in the shadows. One Monday, I got an alarming message from my friend Mario. "Alex, Emily went to your brother. She says she wants you back and something about your job." I felt the blood freeze in my veins, heart pounding, hands shaking. I knew this wasn't a simple meeting, it was a test, an attempt to manipulate. "We need to meet her," Mario insisted, "just to close this chapter." I hesitated for a long time but realized avoiding reality wasn't an option anymore. The meeting happened in a small cafe on the edge of the Gothic Quarter. Emily was already waiting, eyes shining, smile both sincere and puzzling. "Alex," she said as I sat across from her, "I'm ready to discuss everything. I realized my mistakes. I changed." "Changed?" I echoed, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. "Do you still think money matters more than relationships?" She sighed, looked down. "I was selfish. I wanted you to quit a stable job for ambitions that I now see were an illusion, but I still love you, Alex." I looked at her and felt conflicting emotions. Anger, pain, but also warm memories of when I trusted her completely. "Emily," I said slowly, "I understand you might change, but I've changed too. I've learned to value myself, my boundaries, and my happiness. I can't let someone control my life again." "You really want to end everything," she said quietly, tears appearing on her cheeks. "I don't want to erase the past," I replied. "I want to build a future, but a future without manipulations and pressure." We sat in silence, listening to the street noise outside. Inside me was a storm of emotions, but on the surface calm. I realized the main thing, not giving in to someone else's ambitions, even if it's someone you love. A few weeks passed. Emily stopped sending messages and calling. I focused on myself, new projects, friends, personal interests. Every day was a small victory, freedom, self-respect, personal happiness. But the drama didn't end completely. One day, I got a message from Emily's former colleague. "Alex, Emily told friends you're a jerk. She's turning people against you." I took a deep breath. This was the final test. I could get angry, respond, get into a conflict, but I chose differently. I silently deleted the message and continued living my life. In that moment, I understood. Real strength isn't in proving something to someone, but in staying true to yourself. And that's how my breakup story ended. Barcelona became home again, but now just for me alone. The past was behind me, leaving lessons and experience. I kept my dignity, freedom, and inner peace. Emily, I don't know how her life turned out. Maybe she changed, maybe not. But now it doesn't matter. The main thing, I learned to value myself and not let anyone control my decisions and happiness. It's been almost 2 months since I finally cut ties with Emily. Barcelona was gradually returning to its usual rhythm. Morning coffees, noisy streets, small bookstores in the Gothic Quarter where I found inspiration. It seemed life was back on track, but the inner tension still lingered. One Friday evening, I met friends in an old bar in El Raval. Laughter, conversations, and music slightly eased the weight on my soul. But a few minutes later, Laura, my colleague and old friend, joined us. "Alex, have you heard?" She started with worry in her voice. "Emily's actively talking about you on social media again." I sighed deeply, trying to stay calm. "What exactly?" I asked evenly. She's posting stories about how you're a jerk and supposedly ruined her life. It's getting noticed among our mutual acquaintances. I rolled my eyes and told myself I wouldn't fall for the provocation. No comments, no responses. My inner strength grew as I realized my life is mine, and Emily's opinion shouldn't dictate my actions. The next day, I went to the studio and immersed myself in work. A new project demanded full focus, and I almost forgot about yesterday's worry. In the evening, Mario texted, "You know she's trying to contact your parents. I think they're confused." I frowned, contacting my parents. Of course, their support could amplify her manipulations, but I'd already learned to keep distance. That evening, Mario and I took a short walk along Barcelona's coast. The sea breeze, the sound of waves, it all helped sort my thoughts. I told Mario about my feelings, pain, disappointment, but also the inner growth over the past months. "You got it," Mario said. "Real value is your freedom and choice. No one has the right to make you sacrifice yourself for their ambitions." I nodded, feeling like I'd finally found inner balance. But the drama returned unexpectedly. A week later, I received a letter from Emily's lawyer. It was official, cold, emotionless. "Mr. Alex, your ex-fiancée believes your actions caused her moral harm. She reserves the right to compensation for emotional stress and the destruction of a future marriage." I felt my heart clench again. All these months I'd tried to rise above the conflict, but now I had to seriously think about protecting my rights. I consulted a lawyer who listened carefully to my story. "Alex," he said, "it's emotionally tough, but legally you're safe. You have evidence of manipulations and pressure from her side. You're in a winning position." This conversation gave me confidence. I realized protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's necessity. A few more weeks passed, and a new project at the studio fully absorbed my attention. I started traveling around Spain with the team, meeting clients, diving into design and marketing. Every day brought new tasks, challenges, and joy from my work. One evening, as the sun set over Barcelona, I sat on my rooftop, gazing at the city lights. Memories of Emily flooded back, but now they didn't hurt. I knew I'd made the right choice. I'd kept my dignity, freedom, and personal boundaries. It was in that moment I understood the main lesson of this whole story. Love shouldn't cost your freedom. When someone tries to control your choices, real courage is saying no, even if it destroys a relationship that once seemed fated. Emily, maybe she's still looking for someone to submit to her ambitions, but for me, her world no longer matters. I've built my life, my rules, my happiness, and no manipulation, no accusation can change that. Barcelona became home again, truly, for me alone. And that feeling of calm, independence, and inner strength became my greatest achievement. It's been almost 6 months since I broke off the engagement with Emily. Barcelona was gradually becoming my home, not just geographically, but emotionally. I was building my career, meeting new people, traveling, but the sense of emptiness sometimes returned, especially around dates that used to be ours. Anniversaries, holidays, birthdays. One early morning, as the city was just waking up, I got an unexpected call. The screen showed Emily. My heart clenched. "Alex," she started with a trembling voice, "I need to talk to you. I ruined everything." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Emotions surged again, but I knew I couldn't give in. "I'm listening," I replied calmly. She started telling how her ambitions and need for control destroyed not just our relationship, but her own happiness too. She admitted her demands to quit my job for money were selfish and unfair. "I understand if you never want to see me again," she said almost in a whisper, but I needed to admit, I was awful. Inside, emotions mixed. Relief, anger, regret for the wasted years, but mainly pride that I hadn't succumbed to manipulations. We agreed to meet in a neutral place, a small cafe on a narrow Barcelona street. I sat at the table, watching passers-by, trying to anticipate what would come next. When Emily entered, her gaze was full of shame and pain. She tried to smile, but it looked forced. "I want to apologize," she said, looking down. "And I want you to know I've realized my mistakes." I listened silently. Her words seemed sincere, but I understood the past couldn't be changed. You can't undo what was destroyed by years of pressure, manipulations, and expectations. "Emily," I said slowly, "I appreciate your admission, but our paths are different. I can't go back. And honestly, I don't want to." Disappointment and pain flashed in her eyes, but soon she nodded, understanding. We said goodbye, and I felt a strange relief. It was like taking off a heavy backpack after a long climb. A few more weeks passed. I fully dedicated myself to work and friends. New projects inspired, and every day brought a sense of personal growth. My boundaries, once blurred under Emily's pressure, were now solid. I realized relationship value isn't measured by money or convenience, but by mutual respect, support, and freedom to be yourself. And one day, as the sun set over Barcelona, I stood on my apartment terrace, looking at the city lights. The sea breeze gently tousled my hair, and the air was filled with the scent of salt and freedom. In that moment, I understood the main thing. The dramatic events of the past taught me to value my own independence, respect my desires, and most importantly, not let anyone control my life. Yes, I lost Emily, but I gained myself. And that feeling was worth more than any love, any pressure, any regret.